Welcome back to FYIdaho. I'm speaking with Art Thompson, who is the CEO of the John Birch Society, and we're talking about his book, Exposing Terrorism. He's speaking in the Treasure Valley on his book, and it talks about being inside the terror triangle. Art, prior to the break, you were mentioning that there's a lot of focus on Islam.
That's correct.
But you maintain that that's just kind of a way of diverting our attention.
That's true. Now, is Islam a problem with terrorism? Obviously, the answer is yes. But it is being used and perpetuated by Moscow. Look, every time we have a situation where we expose a terrorist organization, what are they armed with? They're armed with Soviet and Chinese weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's no such thing as private enterprise in the arms business in China and Russia. All the factories are state-owned and operated. They know exactly where all those weapons go. And so we're told in the West that this is some arms dealer, some merchant of death that is going out and arming all of these terrorists. Well, he's flying in Russian airplanes. He's a Russian KGB officer, like this bot and that was just arrested, and those sorts of people. But it's always these Russian and Chinese weapons, rocket launchers, automatic Kalashnikovs, and so on and so forth. So that's a clue as to what's going on. Now, are there some independent Muslims? Of course there is, because at the same time that they're doing this, you see, they have to radicalize Islam to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have a recruiting pool from which they recruit terrorists, right? Now, at the bottom, these poor people think they're doing it for Allah, okay? But the higher you get in the organization, the more it becomes power, and Allah has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
There's history to back that up, by the way, that's 1,000 years old. If you study the assassins in the old Muslim world of around 850 to 1,000 years A.D., you'll find that these people went out and assassinated. That's where we get the English word, is from these assassin. It's actually a Muslim word, Arabic or whatever it is. And so they went out and served the orders of the hierarchy of this organization. Let me give you an example of what they did. Where does all this, you go to heaven and have the virgins business that comes from? They used that then. What they would do was they'd take these poor Muslim kids, young men, they would drug them and then put them into a garden with virgins and wine and so on and so forth. They'd come to, and they would partake of all of this for a short period of time. They'd be re-drugged. They would be awakened again in front of the leadership of this organization. They'd say, you were allowed to see heaven. And in their simplistic lives, they thought, okay, I guess I was in heaven. I died, went to heaven, and they came back. These people are all powerful. They tell me now that if I go out and serve them and assassinate under their orders, that I will go to heaven and have these virgins and so on and so forth. It's the same thing that they're using today. They don't drug them and drag them into a garden and play around with that, but they fill their head with all these radical things in under these various imams. As an example, the Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran worked closely with the French Communist Party when he was in exile. Now, is he a Muslim or is he a communist? You see, the answer to that is only in his heart. But the clues are all there that these people work very closely with communists. And I can, tonight in my talk while I'm here, I'm going to show various people like that who obviously are communists first and Muslims second. Communists first, Christians second, that kind of thing. All the evidence is there once you look at it. I like to use the old example of, as children, we're given a line drawing, for instance. I just saw one in a Disney coloring book, a Peg-Leg Pete, and it says, on the opposite page is Peg-Leg Pete's Band of Outlaws. Can you find them? And it's there in the trees, in the foliage, you see. And it's the same way. Once we see it, we never lose sight of it. It might be where are the lions or the tigers or the bears in the jungle or what, so on and so forth. But at first all we see is the leaves and the foliage. Now, if we're tuned by the media to only see the leaves and the foliage, only see Islam instead of what's behind it, then we will never see it. But once you see it and you start noticing these little things, it's always there in front of you. And it becomes so obvious. And then you wonder, how come he can't see it? How come she can't see it? When it's right in front of their eyes. And so that's the thing, is they've been able to buffalo the American people into thinking it's Islam. Does it include Islam? Yes. But behind the terrorist organization is Moscow.
Well,
so that's the two parts of the triangle, Moscow and Islam. But it's Islamic Leninism is what it is. It's a Islamic form of communism.
Now, is any of this in the 9/11 report?
No.
Okay, so let's talk for a moment about Homeland Security.
Okay.
Let's talk about the 9/11 report, and
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on all that.
Well, first of all, we have to understand why 9/11 was initiated to begin with. What was behind that execution? Osama bin Laden told us what it was. And basically what he said was that, in a nutshell, I will quote him exactly in my booklet and in the speech. But in essence, what he was saying was this. We did this to react the American people to stand still for the American government to start taking away their liberties. Just like that. That's the whole purpose behind it. Has that happened? Obviously it's happened. The Patriot Act was written long before the Terrorist Act was initiated. I mean, we had a 342-page document literally handed to Congress within hours of the terrorist attack. It had already been written beforehand because it cross-references too many other laws, too many other bureaus to have been written in under months. And so it was all ready to go. They didn't want, whoever wrote it and whoever was pushing this thing real hard did not want the congressman to read it, because the only people who really saw it was the committee that put it to the floor. And thank God they took out of it the heavy habeas corpus suspension. There was a suspension of habeas corpus in there, a right that's been protected since the Magna Carta. And we would not have habeas corpus today if it wasn't for that particular thing. It just so happens that one member, Sessenbrenner from Wisconsin, noticed that was in there, took it out before it hit the floor. But most of the other congressmen never saw it before they voted on it. They were stampeded into it.
So they were obviously relying on the fact that they don't read the bills, which we found in too many instances.
Absolutely.
You know, the bailout and other things where they get these huge bills and they don't read them and they vote on them.
I know. Well, just like the 1,000-page thing that was, well, there's 3 actual bills before Congress, 4 now, relative to health care. I've got a video that I've preserved in my office where one congressman actually got up and said, "Don't read the bill, just vote for it," regarding health care. Well, that's outrageous.
Well, I can remember back in the 80s when I served in the Idaho State Legislature, we had an anti-terrorist bill. And of course, during that time, none of us were thinking of anything even remotely like 9/11. And so I couldn't understand why we would have an anti-terrorist bill. And as I read it, it had the ability for officials to go in, knock down doors, the individual had very little rights if they even suspected, and they even could confiscate private property. Well, when we come back, I'd like to explore a little bit more about Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, and this triangle, this terror triangle that you talk about. I'm Elizabeth Allan Hodge. The program is FYIdaho.